Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining today's webinar on People Will Not Be the Weakest Link in Cybersecurity. I'm Tony Chiu, your host from Symantec. Just an instruction before we begin. If you have questions for our presenter, do type them into the questions window in your attendee control panel at any time. We will collect these and address them during the Q&A session. I would now like to introduce our speaker, Mr. Noel Chiok, Strategy and Security Practice Leader, Cybersecurity Services, Asia Pacific and Japan. He has more than 20 years of industry experience with in-depth knowledge of Asian business and is responsible for the overall strategy and security protecting our customers across Asia Pacific and Japan. Noel focuses on helping customers address their underserved needs related to effective and efficient cyber threat monitoring, identification, investigation, and response. Let's welcome Noel Chiok.
Thank you, Tony. Good afternoon and good morning, everybody across Asia today. We thank you for taking the time out to join us for my session on People Will Not Be the Weakest Link. Whether you are just starting your company or you have established yourself in an industry, a cybersecurity mistake can wipe out all your progress and your growth. Businesses do not realize the level of sophistication that hackers bring to the table. Whether you are attempting to secure your business, you have to be right 100% of the time, whereas a hacker or malicious attacker will only have to get it right once. Companies who get hacked or have been compromised often wind up going out of businesses, being unable to shoulder the burden of cleaning up or dealing with the mess. Threats and epidemic of breaches continue to be headline-grabbing and in front of news. The average total cost of business among data breaches continues to look at somewhat around $3 to $4 million. And company losses from cyber attacks include things like remediation costs, loss of productivity, legal fees, loss of data, the lowering of stock price, and the lowering of brand confidence and perception. Some of this perception as well moves to where most people really want to consider how to defend things like an advanced persistent threat. What we have here is a typical 5-stage process of moving from reconnaissance to the discovery, capture, and then exfiltration. Most people will wait until they've experienced a cyber threat or an attack like this before they commence taking action. But that's not the time to start searching for a solution or to look for a practical measure or countermeasure, especially when things can be fraught with uncertainty, and also potentially results and information that you have may be skewed or blinded by a time sensitivity challenge that you have that's ever present that needs to be dealt with as soon as possible. By thinking everything through, and obviously in advance, you and your business will be able to take corrective and compliance-related type of actions quickly should a breach get identified, or should there be a potential chance of a breach. Taking preventative measures by implementing good cybersecurity technologies is no doubt a best practice that we all know, but we do not often see. At Black Hat in 2016 this year, one of the security specialists actually surveyed approximately 250 attendees who identified themselves as hackers. There was no indication of whether they were a white hacker, a black hacker, or a gray hacker. More than 84% of the respondents in this survey actually indicated that they had 5 things that were commonly seen or commonly challenged if they were not well defended against within an organization. And one of these 5 points actually talks about security awareness and security training, where most security professionals still believe that human beings are the weakest link in any organization. Of course, the sophistication of social engineering attacks, phishing attacks that have continued to emerge in the past few years means that organizations need to seriously consider expanding things like IT security awareness programs, IT testing programs for individuals and employees, beyond things of simple tests or acknowledgement of IT policies or user acceptance policies and such. Especially when personal mobile devices and mobile devices are used for business-related type of work, be it emails or communicating between employees. These type of security challenges become a lot more evident, which means the behaviors of employees need to be a lot more imperative and a lot more considered to ensure that a breach or a potential data loss isn't resulted from the convenience that they've been provided or enjoy. Security awareness training has also a history of variable results, and we believe that based on some of the functionality and tools that we can provide at Symantec, it will help you develop a process or streamline and improve the process that you have today to address these issues. Getting your employees on board is one of the biggest requirements. As you know, most of the employees who are non-technical or do not have a strong computing literacy background is often going to be challenged by some of the things that are mentioned here. Just one simple click could result in catching a malware or things like a virus that shuts down your business temporarily or even permanently. Getting everyone on the same page is no doubt important and often overlooked or an underestimated defense tactic, because awareness and improving of practices around dealing with security issues throughout the workforce may be something that is often considered as less of a priority, when most of the focus could be enhancing security defense around perimeters, around your egress and egress points, and such. So as such, employees remain one of the weakest links in cybersecurity prevention. The educating and the enabling of associates to understand IT security risks and best practices must become a priority for businesses in order to ensure that we are supporting and providing the best ability to defend against these types of risk and attack methods that's being leveraged to. So how does this actually lead towards if security awareness and defending against these type of attack vectors lead to? We know that data breaches and leaks is often the case, whereas if it's less of an impact, but yet as often and commonly a major issue is dealing with malware and ransomware type of attacks, which is very, very prevalent in the Asia-Pacific region in the past year to year and a half so. And a poor demonstration of the security program and security practices that you have in place means that this could lead to a potential reduction in your security funding or a reduction in prioritization of your security programs that you're intending to implement across the organization, which really leads to the fact that when the inability to demonstrate the return on investment of security, executives themselves are also challenged by other board members around why we are spending so much in security, what is the effectiveness of spending this type of resources into security. These become questions that have to move into a very, very defensive type of approach to even simply justify their existence and why we are doing certain things. So how can Symantec help with some of the options and solutions that we have today? Many people think that in order to become infected with ransomware, someone has to download an application in the environment. Of course, that's still the case. While that is one way to contract ransomware, there are other methods of actually contracting ransomware, which requires very, very minimal effort and very, very minimal knowledge from the user side. All it needs to take is just one simple click, and ransomware can be infected. Then you've got the payloads that gets downloaded, and so forth and so forth. So ransomware attempts and also malicious attackers can trick employees into different ways. Some of the most common ways that we know are things like social engineering. Many people continue to think that Facebook account is mostly for personal or for social media fun, or should I say a more leisure usage, which means they don't focus on maintaining a strong or secure password, whereas in a corporate authentication process, they are often forced to set up a very complex password. They're forced to change the password every 3 months or 6 months and so forth. But as a result of people being continually compromised through social media, things of posting up certain links, be it a benign link or the non-intention to harm from a link of, for example, posting about, hey, there is a health risk everybody should be considering about, or here are some tips to better look at traveling. These potential links may be embedded with potential clickware or web fraud, which then further subsequently leads to the injection of malware into the local network that whoever that can be clicking on from. So employees need to understand around some of the training and understanding why clicking on these things are potentially a risk, and also something that should be understood while not discouraging the behavior and utilization of the usage. So through feedback, relevance, and the measurable benefits, and the practical measure and continual practice is really some of the ways we know with relevant content at what interests your employees is going to make your phishing readiness or your phishing testing services relevant. We also know that phishing emails that get downloaded, which are also effectively the bulk of the risk and challenges, it's really about the techniques that continually evolve. So some of these techniques really come with some of the themes that you would see here on your screen. And really to fool somebody into clicking on these links is really to understand what is of interest to your employees and what they could be up against. So a very, very good example is that if your organization could be running a potential public campaign where, let's just say, we are giving away 500 first discount to customers who are buying a new product, because they know that this program or this sales activity is actually being conducted. Employees would then very often respond to emails that's associated with that. For example, somebody may ask, I'm not able to access the link. Can you help me? Here is the link that I was provided. That is a very, very good way to try and breach into the organization whilst getting the focus of the employees, because they know of a potential campaign that's actually being run. Whereas if there is a good security awareness, they should understand that links that's associated, for example, that has been published online, doesn't exist. For example, it could be a unique shopping code that's actually being provided. So that means any emails that get sent to the organization that's associated with the campaign will effectively be almost benign and also meaningless in aspect. The third way that we know when it comes to phishing attempts is also commonly seen right now is the spoofing of free Wi-Fi networks. As we know, traveling around and using data roaming across the world is expensive, which means if a malicious attacker is to set up a spoof of a Wi-Fi free network, it's very hard to tell from a user's perspective which is real or which isn't real. If you were to go to a public shopping center or a hotel and it says free Wi-Fi from Hilton, and there is another one that says free Wi-Fi from Hilton number 2, it is very hard to tell whether the first one or the second one is legitimate, or if both are actually legitimate or not. What that means is when a victim is connected to one of these Wi-Fi networks and it is a malicious one, they could effectively easily embed a pop-up link and say, click here to start your free Wi-Fi. And from then on, that could effectively launch an attack and also breach the system they're trying to understand and connect into. So these 3 ways are some of the things in consideration where we need to think about. So at Symantec, we've come up with a phishing readiness service where it allows you to customize and also look at different ways of providing relevant content and to continually assess your users based on some of the features where we've made available and easy to integrate across your environment. Some of these information also as well allows you to very quickly tailor specific reports and trends associated with the employees that you sample and test, and also allow you to very quickly identify and also measure which particular department or specific employees that need a lot more training in order to ensure that these things are addressed in the shortest amount of possible time. The results and findings that our phishing service provides as well also gives you a good ability to trend and understand what these figures look like, what sort of click-through rates, and also which type of divisions in your organization that needs further work, and also really to understand how to benchmark and improve your employees to really identify which employees did fail for it and who didn't fail for it, and also really demonstrate to management and also to executives of how easy it is to fall for a phishing attempt, be it something that is happening currently or just a traditional way of breaching an organization. It also really then gives you the ability to provide metrics to demonstrate, trend, and understand, which no doubt gives you the certainty and also to prevent and to stop a potential attack from occurring in future. Through phishing readiness and also cybersecurity, strengthening cyber readiness through some of the live testing and also scenarios around some of the sophisticated target attacks that we have today is important, because understanding how an attacker operates and functions means you would also be able to mimic and think about what ways your organization could be potentially breached, or what things would entice your employees to click on, which could be a malicious type of attack. The continual ability of moving the different ways of attacks and really shifting the mindset that, hey, today it could be just an email, tomorrow it could be potentially a LinkedIn type of request or a LinkedIn type of update, or to really trying to change the objectives all the time will ensure that the understanding of these type of attacks don't necessarily only come from what you may or may not know, but also really to focus on the different methods that either ensures there is a high success rate or a low success rate in your organization. This is also a very good way to benchmark and measure some of the things like how would your new employees or potential contractors that's coming into your organization would respond to some of the security practices and policies that you actually already have in place. Which means the skills that are also applicable to your employees today and the ability for them to refresh and continually test their current knowledge and also be aware of the different type of security awareness and different type of attack vectors is a very, very good way to help them understand security in much easier method and something that relates to either potentially their work or potentially their interests as well. The identification of the skills gaps in your employees and to build a comprehensive follow-up training plan also makes sense and makes it easy for you to understand, to tailor what is relevant or not. For example, if you were to know that employees already understand that they shouldn't be clicking on links that have shortened URLs. So what that really would mean that, your security training program should be updated to no longer focus around shortened URLs because that is already well known in the organization. However, if there is a very good identification from trending that indicates that when we run a public sale campaign, there are a lot of questions that come through around how do we use the sale campaign, or how do we use some of the unique codes that's associated with the sale campaign. That could be an area of focus that would shift the perception and also allow you to strengthen some of the potential type of attacks that could be leveraged should an attacker try to use that as a platform to attack your organization. Stopping attackers in their tracks and promptly alerting your teams to respond would mean that you're able to demonstrate and also to show that the metrics and the security policies and practices that you have in place are effective, which means the investment and the time that you spend to build your security programs are strong, are key metrics and indicators that you can provide to executives to say, this is why we are spending X amount of money in security, why we are spending our focus in defending against different type of attacks beyond simply beefing up or enhancing your investments around security devices or security products as such. With that, I thank you for your time, and I open the line up to any questions that you have in regards to my presentation today. Thank you.
Thank you, Noel. We will now address the questions that have been submitted. As a reminder, you can still submit questions through the questions pane in your attendee control panel. Noel, our first question from the audience is, how can we protect our web servers from ransomware attack?
Thanks for the question there. So how can we protect our web servers from ransomware attack? Well, this isn't a directly related question to what has been presented. I'll take a different approach to this, is that ransomware attacks is generally clicked by a user, which means if a developer is working in your web server, they really shouldn't be doing this in the production environment. And the system that is being used to access the web server should be itself clean and should not be the standard system that is being used by the developer or by the employee who is potentially updating code, potentially updating server patches or security patches and whatnot. So that is one of the good ways to stop or prevent your web servers from ransomware attacks. And I hope I've answered your question.
Right. Thank you, Noel. Well, the next question is, what are the threats in terms of priority? For example, emails that contain payloads for compromising servers and emails after credentials.
Thanks for the question. These are very different ways of looking at that. Emails that contain payloads could be potentially stopped by your mail server application. If the payload is too big or it potentially hits a specific type of, for example, configuration that you have. Let's just say if you don't allow executables to be sent in payloads or you don't accept zip files, that could be potentially stopped by that. Is emails just after credentials just as important as a priority or just as important? The short answer is absolutely yes. The ways of stealing your credentials generally would be done two ways. One, where a malware is downloaded through clicking on a link, or two, it could be even as benign as saying, can you simply provide this information because your credentials has expired, or for example, your frequent traveler program has expired, could you please provide me this information in order for you to update this? So utilizing phishing readiness, you're able to test both of these scenarios very, very well, which through the phishing readiness service that we provide, you're able to attach files or attach URLs and links to demonstrate the effectiveness of doing this from both ways. So the ability also to respond on a phishing readiness email as well would also allow you to test and measure how employees may respond in the event that there isn't actually a link, but simply a follow-up information based on respond to me type of approach.
Okay, right. Thank you. Well, another question that just came in is, what are the metrics you would use to paint a picture of the security state in an organization?
Thanks for the question. I would keep the response to phishing readiness and security awareness to keep it on theme with our session today. Some of the things that I would use as a metric is rather than the number of phishing of emails attempts that's being sent out, I would say if we sent out phishing emails to a department of 100 people, one of the good metrics you would have is the percentage of users that has opened the email, reviewed the email, clicked on the email, and also some of the metrics that you can also say is time to respond or time to review that kind of emails or click on that email is also a good measure. The third metrics you would associate as well is generally trending. What you want to do is demonstrate how effective it is on the first campaign that where you execute, and potentially doing a follow-up campaign either almost immediately or after a period of time. For example, you might want to do a follow-up phishing readiness test in a month, or you might want to do it in 3 months' time. So those are very, very easy metrics that you can use to demonstrate the effectiveness of phishing readiness in your organization.
Okay, right. Another question. Can you integrate phishing readiness with other products?
Thank you for that question. Yes, absolutely. So Symantec's phishing readiness service allows you to integrate with e-learning systems, things where you have LMS learning systems around providing potentially security awareness type of videos or security awareness type of trainings. That is one very common method. Or the other one is linking this up to potentially walkthrough or self-assessment type of training is also two common ways that you can link up the phishing readiness service to, based on metrics and trends and results that gets provided from the service that you execute.
Okay. The next one is the system able to handle bulk mass mailing on demand?
Yes, absolutely. The emails that you would send out, I'll give you a typical example. Let's just say if you had 500 employees that you want to sample. The minute where you set up your phishing readiness campaign in the secure portal, and when you execute that, it gets sent through our secure servers and our mail exchange servers. Generally, the time to emails or the phishing readiness emails that get sent out to when it hits the employee's inbox is generally 1 to 3 seconds time. So there is almost next to no load and also next to no latency delay in response.
Okay, thanks. So is there a way to show our employees how ransomware phishing attacks are performed?
Yes, absolutely. Not through phishing readiness itself, because this is more of a tool and more of a testing capability for your organization to use. However, we also have an additional service that adds on to phishing readiness, where it's typically combined together called security awareness training. So utilizing Symantec's security awareness training, we have interactive demonstrations of how a ransomware or phishing attack is performed from the start to an end, and what potentially happens when you click and execute a ransomware from occurring. Or what does it look like when you hit ransomware, and how does it look like on a user system, and what is their viewpoint, and also what is the background that occurs from a system process perspective around what a ransomware attack actually looks like.
Thank you. Moving on to the next question. Is the sensitive data, metrics, emails, and landing pages accessible by others?
Thank you for that question. That is only accessible within the company. So Symantec's phishing readiness and also security awareness portals are secure within its own container, which means only employees and authorized access users within your organization would have the ability to access not only the platform, but also, more importantly, the content that's associated with your phishing readiness. For example, you might have crafted a very, very specific phishing readiness test that is only unique to your organization, which means that type of emails are just as important as the test itself. So this information is very much secure and only within your access. The most important thing as well is some of the trends and also the users that get identified from the training. We want to make sure that information stays within your organization, which means this data is not accessible and is secured as part of the service that we provide.
Okay, thank you. The last question. How many users can you support on your platform?
So typically, we can support a very, very low number from 10 to 100 users and up to 10,000, 15,000 from an instance, from executing an instance perspective. This is the typical type of space that you would have. However, if you have a large organization where you have 10,000 users upwards, say from 10,000 to 50,000, 50,000 to 100,000, from a platform perspective, we are able to provide the capability for you to execute these phishing tests sequentially in order to ensure that you are able to test this from a latency perspective, that it's not going to be an issue, and also ensuring that you're sampling the right type of employees. What we found from experience is that, let's just say if you're going to sample 100,000 employees at one shot, more than likely it's going to get a lot of buy-in from different stakeholders within the organization, and potentially that may be an impact from a business process perspective where are we able to get all of the stakeholders buy-in before we execute the program or not. So what we generally recommend our customers do is either sample 1 to 2 or 3 business units, or if your organization is small enough, you can sample the whole organization. However, if you have a very large organization, sampling it from department to department might be a much better way as opposed to running it from a corporate-wide perspective.
Great. It looks like we've covered most of the questions. Noel, is there anything else you wanted to cover before wrap up?
Thanks for that, Tony. So I just wanted to raise some of the points as well that hasn't been covered in some of the questions from our guests today. Is that do we support languages other than English? In Asia, as everybody would know, there are many, many languages and different cultures that we have in place. For example, Chinese and Korean and Japanese typically uses double byte. So are we able to support double byte input and also multilingual input as part of the platform? Yes, absolutely. We can do that. So some of these things are conveniences, and also we know English may not be the first preference that organization may function in, and also potentially employees may not be interested in emails in a language that they are not familiar with. With that, I thank you for your time and appreciate your attendance today.
Well, thank you, Noel, and thank you, everyone, for attending today's webinar. If you have any other questions which we were unable to answer live, we'll send you the replies via email. For everyone else, in about a week, you will receive a follow-up email with a link to a recording of today's webinar. On behalf of Symantec and our presenter, thanks for joining us, and have a great rest of your day. Bye.